You know, to really understand the 20th century and honestly, to understand our world today, we have to look at one of its most destructive figures. So this isn't just a biography of Adolf Hitler. We're going to dive into the anatomy of a dictator, how a person like this is even made. I mean, that's the big haunting question, isn't it? He wasn't born a monster, he became one. So how on earth did this resentful, drifting young man manage to take control of one of the world's most advanced nations and unleash just unprecedented horror? That's what we're going to break down. And let's be really clear here. This is not just some old history lesson. It's a critical look at how tyranny actually works, the incredible power of ideology, and just how fragile democracy can be. Understanding how this happened is our best defense against it ever happening again. Okay, let's get into it. To understand the dictator, you have to start with the young man, and with the toxic ideas he was soaking in long before he ever got a taste of power. Because a worldview this extreme is never, ever built in a vacuum. So this is really ground zero, personal failure, and this deep, simmering resentment. In Vienna, Hitler had this big dream of being a great artist, but it was just shattered. The Academy of Fine Arts rejected him, twice. He was left totally broke, living in men's hostels, and that failure, it created this powerful bitterness against what he saw as the system, a world that he felt had personally wronged him. This made him like a sponge for extremist ideas. And Vienna back then was just a hotbed for these kinds of toxic ideas. He basically took three key ingredients and mixed them into his own deadly cocktail. First, you've got pan-German nationalism, this idea of uniting all German-speaking people. Second, this really vicious anti-Semitism, which gave him a convenient scapegoat for every problem in society. And third, social Darwinism, this brutal belief that different races were just locked in a fight for survival. Hitler didn't invent these ideas, not at all. He just brewed them together into his own lethal worldview. And then came World War I. For him, the war finally gave him a sense of purpose. So when Germany lost, it was this unimaginable shock. He completely bought into this powerful, poisonous lie, the stab-in-the-back myth. This idea that Germany wasn't actually defeated on the battlefield but was betrayed from within, well, that became the absolute core of his political rage and his most powerful propaganda tool. So, he's got this twisted worldview all forged and ready. But how does he actually get into power? Well, as we're about to see, a massive national crisis became the perfect opportunity for an aspiring dictator. After he tried to seize power by force back in 1923, you might have heard of the beer hall push, he landed in prison, and there he learned a critical lesson. He totally flipped his strategy. He realized he couldn't just take power, he had to be given it. So he would use the system itself, the elections, the speeches, the whole democratic process as a weapon to tear down democracy from the inside. And this right here shows you his opening, clear as day. Before the Great Depression hit, the Nazis were a joke, a fringe party getting a pathetic 2.6% of the vote. But then, the German economy completely collapsed. Unemployment went through the roof and people got desperate. All of a sudden, Hitler's extreme message, blaming scapegoats, promising a return to greatness, found a huge audience. In just 4 years, his party went from totally irrelevant to the biggest in Germany. And this is the moment. January 30th, 1933. He gets what he wants. He is legally appointed chancellor. The old conservative elites who helped him get there made a catastrophic mistake. They were arrogant. They thought, oh, we can use this guy for our own goals and then just push him aside. They tragically, fatally underestimated his ruthlessness. Once he was in power, Hitler moved with terrifying speed. He systematically took apart the state and put his ideology into violent, brutal practice. Let's take a look at just how he did it. I mean, just look at the speed. Within a single month of him becoming chancellor, there's a fire at the Parliament building. He uses it as the perfect excuse to suspend all civil liberties. Gone. Overnight. A month after that, the Enabling Act gives him the power to rule by decree. And within 18 months, all other parties are banned, his opponents are in concentration camps, and he is the undisputed Führer. German democracy was dead. So, with his power at home now absolute, Hitler starts looking outward. As he's rearming Germany and making all these aggressive demands, the international community just falters. Traumatized by the First World War, Britain and France adopted this policy of appeasement. They kept giving in to his demands, hoping to avoid another war. But it had the exact opposite effect. It just convinced Hitler that the West was weak and decadent and emboldened him to push for even more. And that push for war gave him the cover to carry out the ultimate, horrific goal of his ideology. We have to be clear about this. The Holocaust was not an accident. It wasn't a byproduct of the war. It was a central goal of the Nazi regime from the very beginning. The systematic, industrialized murder of 6 million Jews, along with millions of others they deemed undesirable. It was the final monstrous expression of that worldview he built back in Vienna. So the war eventually ended and the regime fell, but the consequences of Hitler's actions permanently reshaped our entire planet. This history casts a long, dark shadow that we are all still living under today. So much of the world we live in now was built directly from the ashes of his war. I mean, think about it. The United Nations was created specifically to stop another conflict like this. The State of Israel was founded directly out of the horror of the Holocaust. We created entirely new concepts in international law, like genocide, to prosecute these kinds of crimes. And his war didn't just end. It kicked off both the nuclear age and the Cold War, which shaped a rest of the entire century. So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, his rise to power gives us a terrifyingly clear playbook for how tyranny works. The warning signs are right there for us to learn from. Blaming a scapegoat group for all of society's problems, attacking the free press, dehumanizing your political opponents, eroding independent institutions like the courts. These aren't just historical footnotes, they are timeless alarm bells. And that really brings us to the final, most important question. Studying Hitler's path gives us the pattern. It gives us the warning signs for how a democracy can die. And it forces us to look at our own world and ask ourselves, are we being vigilant? Do we recognize these signs when they start to appear today? That is the vital, enduring lesson of this entire history.